Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, first this afternoon, just as we were coming on air, it was announced in the last hour that the former Chancellor, George Osborne, is to be the editor of the London Evening Standard. He's going to combine that job with remaining an MP, we're told, and he's got lots of other interests as well. We're joined now by the man who broke the story, the BBC's media editor, Amol Rajan. Amol, why is he doing this?
Andrew, I think he's doing this because it's a clear indication that he doesn't think that staying within Parliament and being part of Theresa May's team is necessarily going to be a fruitful or productive few years of his life. He's still very much in his prime. He's 45 years old. And I think it's fair to say that the way in which he was dismissed from Cabinet in a rather brutal fashion last summer, where Theresa May, I think, briefed the line out, or her team briefed the line out, saying that if he wanted to lead the party, the Tory party this is, he needs to better understand it from the backbenches, I think left him feeling a bit like he wasn't necessarily wanted. How on earth he reconciles this, Andrew, with the other jobs that he's got, one being an MP, which a lot of people think is a full-time job, and of course his 4 days a month at BlackRock, the world's biggest asset manager, where he gets £650,000 a year, which is what most people take 25 years to earn in Britain. It's going to be very hard to see, and I wonder whether or not the moment when there's a boundary change and Tatton, the constituency that Osborne represents, is realigned, if you like, will be the moment where he says, actually, this is not something that's tenable. I think for the standard...
Okay, no, hold on, let's unpick, Amol, let's unpick some of this bit by bit. In your view, is he aware of just how grueling a job being a hands-on editor of the Standard is? You have to be at your desk by 6 o'clock in the morning. You've got several editions to get away. And by mid-afternoon, when you do that, you then have to get all the feature pages away for the next day. It's a 12, sometimes 15-hour day. How can you do that and be an MP?
Well, Andrew, you've been an editor. You were editor of the Sunday Times for a long time. I was the editor of The Independent for close to 3 years in that same building. I worked very closely with people on the Standard. It is an extraordinarily grueling job. I was doing 100 hours a week at times. Obviously, now that I work at the BBC, I'm working even harder, Andrew, to give value to the licence fee payer. But it is extraordinarily grueling. And I think actually he'll be into the office at 5 in the morning. Yeah. The Standard's come down to one edition, so he probably thinks he'll be free by about 11 o'clock. But it doesn't work like that. With the Standard, you've got to go and speak to advertisers, you've got to go to events, you've got to chair meetings, you've got to speak to staff. I mean, being an editor isn't just, as you know, Andrew, about seeing off the pages. It's about managing a team. Indeed. It's about a commercial strategy, and it's about dealing with difficult politicians. All
right, well, let me ask you another question then. He's paid a ton of money, as you mentioned, by BlackRock, major financial institution. Where does that leave the city pages of the Evening Standard? They're compromised.
Well, it will be very interesting to see how Osborne covers both BlackRock and the world of asset management generally. Of course, at BlackRock, his former conciliary and senior advisor, Rupert Harrison, who's a regular guest on the Daily Politics, is one of the people that would have helped recruit him there. So he's got huge connections in the world of asset management. He's also got huge connections in the world of Conservative politics. And I think even more than the city pages, what I'm going to be looking very closely at, Andrew, is how he covers the Conservative Party. Because the worst thing that could happen for the Evening Standard and for George Osborne is for George Osborne to come across as a sort of Tory lackey. For what it's worth, I don't think he will. I think that he thinks vengeance is a dish best served through the pages of a very powerful newspaper, and I think this is probably something of a coup for the Standard. But how on earth he reconciles it with his other jobs, I think we'll have to wait and see.
Well, we'll see if it's a coup. They've hired someone who's never even been a journalist, never mind an editor. I mean, I'm waiting for an application to be a brain surgeon. And I expect one this afternoon from Guy's Hospital. Let me finally ask you this, though. You used to work for them. What's in this for the Lebedevs, who own the Standard, the Russian oligarchs? What's in this for them?
Well, they get a very high-profile editor, a high-caliber editor, and I think it's worth saying...
Well, you don't know he's high-caliber. He's never been an editor.
Well, he's a high-caliber individual. He's a former Chancellor of the Exchequer, and it's an interesting and bold appointment. I think what the Standard needs to do, the Standard is a free newspaper. It doesn't have a cover price, and therefore it's very, very heavily reliant on print display advertising. That's a market which is disappearing across the industry to the tune of about 20 or 21%. That's a problem for the Standard, and therefore what Osborne's going to have to do is not just the editorial bit, which I think he's thinking he can do between 5 in the morning and midday, but also the commercial bit, transforming that business from being just a journalistic business to one that does events, ticketing, marketing, data, all that kind of stuff that media companies are now increasingly going to have to do, and that's what the Lebedevs will be looking to him to do.
All right, Amol, thank you for that. Congratulations on breaking the story. It's Surprised, it's increased my propensity to be surprised, that's for sure. We're joined now from his constituency by the Labour MP, John Mann. John Mann, what is your reaction to the appointment of the former Chancellor as editor of the Evening Standard?
Well, I would be saying good luck to him. Off you go, just like one of my colleagues, Tristram Hunt, disappeared off to be director of the Victoria and Albert Museum for some reason. But he seems to want to stay on and get his parliamentary salary as well. And it seems to me he's taking the mickey out of the taxpayer and the general public in doing that.
You don't think he can combine, and it would be unprecedented, we can't find a previous example of this, of him remaining a member of Parliament, and of course, as we were saying, he's got several other interests as well, and be a hands-on editor of the Evening Standard. You don't think he can do both?
Well, he won't be taking any of his share of work in Parliament. He won't be sitting on any committees. He won't be attending any committees. Won't be attending the sessions inside Parliament. He'll turn up for the occasional vote, having not heard the debate, and that's fundamentally wrong. I also think it devalues our democracy because his constituents are not getting value for money out of him. We all know he's going to go at the next election because he's been booted out by Theresa May ignominiously, and the Boundary Commission abolishes his seat. He ought to go now, and good luck to him if he goes. But you know, Tristram Hunt did the honourable thing. He got a new job, and he didn't pretend he could do a second job as well. And in Osborne's case, because it's a third job. What? Totally unacceptable for him to stay.
But why do you think he's going to go at the next election? He may well see himself, indeed some of his those close to him do, that he's the king over the water. Now the king in the editor's seat in the Standard, that if the whole Brexit business goes wrong, he can see himself placed for a comeback in the Tory party, and the Standard may well provide him with a springboard to do that.
Well, so George told us it was all going to be disaster by now, and he was wrong on that. So his economic predictions have never proved to be very reliable. But, you know, what's he going to be doing as an MP? You know, I've just done 3 surgeries. I've got another 2 to do today in my constituency. People coming to me with issues that they can only go to an MP on. I'll give you an example. The very last person I saw 20 minutes ago is the mother of a British soldier murdered by the IRA in 1979. And she's angry that there's no national memorial for those who were killed in Northern Ireland. The only person she can go to is her MP. Will she get any joy out of me raising the issue? I've no idea. I'll do so to the best of my ability. But she's got nowhere else to go.
Okay.
George Osborne is not going to be doing that kind of work. And it devalues Parliament by allowing MPs to carry on in this way and pretend, because that's what he's doing, that he's been an MP when he's not.
All right.
He's doing 2 other jobs, and he shouldn't be an MP as well.
OK, John Mann, thank you for that. We'll leave it there with you now. We're joined here in the studio in Westminster by the political commentator John Rentoul. So, is this a stepping stone to a new dimension in his political career, or is it a stepping stone out of politics and into other things?
I think it's a stepping stone out of politics, Andrew, because I think George Osborne didn't stand down at the same time as his friend David Cameron did, because he still thought that he might have a route back into the top of politics, especially wanting to get his own back on Theresa May for the way that she got rid of him. But I think he's possibly realised that that's not going to happen, and this is the sort of job that, if it comes up, it's very difficult for someone who always wanted to be a journalist to refuse.
Do you buy that? Because all the information I have suggests that George Osborne has been biding his time. He thinks Brexit is going to be a disaster. He thinks it'll end in tears, and he thinks he will be vindicated.
Well, I think if he does want this to be a way back into the very top of politics, and it would be the very top, I imagine, that he'd be interested in, and I think he's making some serious miscalculations. Because, for example, you know, a few days a month on an incredibly inflated salary at a financial institution doesn't go down well with the public. And I think the idea of running a newspaper for the capital city when you're simultaneously, I mean, on the same day today that it was announced that he had the job at the Standard, he was one of the most outspoken voices lobbying on this controversial issue of the school funding changes that have been brought in. You cannot do both, and it looks very bad. And so I think if he does want to weigh back in, he's queering the pitch for himself with this, actually.
I mean, I certainly, in terms of the logistics, if he wants to be a hands-on editor, it's very hard to see how he can remain an MP, and that just knowing, having had first-hand experience of what's involved in being an editor. But what's in it for the Lebedevs? What's in it for the Russian oligarchs that own this newspaper?
Well, as Amol said, it's a coup for the Standard to have, somebody of that standing as the editor, someone who can be the front person for London's.
But is that all he's going to? Is
newspaper.
he going to be the front? Is he going to be de facto an editor-in-chief? Above the fray, where someone else does all the hard work.
Well, that's what we've got to see, isn't it?
We don't know that yet.
Because there are, as you say, two ways of doing this. You can either just be the sort of the front person, the person who networks for the Evening Standard, presents the Evening Standard on the grand stage, or you could be someone who gets involved with the inky stuff. He wanted to be a journalist when he was a young man.
Yeah, but he was not back. They didn't hire him.
Well, yeah, but he could prove them all wrong.
Well, coming in as editor, I mean, what was he born with a silver pen in his mouth?
Well, maybe he thinks so. And as you possibly know, he is a very engaging and entertaining
person. I understand that.
In private, which never came across on.
But how can you run one of the Evening Standard is the paper of Europe's financial capital. He is being paid, what is it, £650,000 a year by one of the major financial institutions. Where does that leave the Standard city pages?
Well, I think he will have to make a choice. I mean, if he enjoys being editor of the Standard, then I think being MP for Tatton and being an advisor to BlackRock will have to go.
Could the Lebedevs afford another £650,000 to make up the gap on top of what they're already going to pay him?
I don't think he needs that kind of money. I don't think anybody needs that kind of money.
Well, he's taking it.
Yes, but I mean, for how long? Maybe he doesn't regard BlackRock as a very long-term proposition.
Maybe he fancies being Mayor of London.
Well, maybe he does. But, I mean, I would just like to say this question of whether you get inky fingers or whether you're the kind of celebrity editor. I mean, it is very important for the Standard to have that kind of figurehead. But actually, I would say that Sarah Sands, who was the previous editor, who's now going to go to the BBC Today programme, she was very good because she managed to do both. She
was hands-on, but she was a journalist.
She was a proper, she's a proper journalist, exactly. So she actually editorially positioned the Standard very well. But she was also on the party pages, making sure the Standard was hosting all the great debates, etc. You don't have to be a non-journalist to deliver that kind of profile for the Evening Standard. I think it's a bit of an insult to the profession of journalism myself.
If you were Labour or Lib Dem, and this is a Labour city,
yes,
and Lib Dems have seats, why would you deal with the Standard now?
Well, I mean, the Standard's always had that problem because it always has been a slightly conservative-leaning.
Yeah, but not edited by a former Chancellor.
No, I think that's going to be interesting. We're going to have to see how George Osborne deals with that.
Well, we can all agree it's exciting.
Well, it took me completely by surprise.
Me too.
Before I came on.
John Rentoul, thank you.
I've been getting away with it all.